So really to understand the importance of what we're talking about today and what we're going to be looking at is to understand what's happened to children around the world and America in the last 30 to 40 years. It really is, this is the pandemic.
Yeah.
So you look at this, especially with the brain, autism, ADD, ADHD, 300 to 500% increase in the last 30 to 40 years. Then you have all the other physical, obesity, the connected things. But when we look at the overall picture, never before in our lifetime and in our history have we seen such a huge increase in these very, very important, impactful disorders. And when we understand that, for children, we're building the foundation. This is where it all starts. If we don't do it correctly in those first 7 years, then we see the ill effects later in life. So all the more important.
Ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, as they say, right?
And if we just focus in on, the chief sort of mind-brain disorders, ADD, ADHD, autism, developmental disabilities, we see now that it's really 1 in 5 children in America is suffering from one of these disorders. ADD, ADHD increased hugely, even just from 2008. Depression, obviously the last 3 or 4 years, what happened in the world affected this too. Anxiety, also huge increases over the last 10, 15 years. And if we come to autism and the autistic spectrum, this is the one that everybody should sit down and realize what this number means. Because we've gone from 1979, one of the first studies in the world to actually look at this as a global phenomena. So we've gone from 1 in 500 children to 1 in 150 in 2000, and now we're at 1 in 36 in America.
Wow.
That's the progression. If we don't understand, if we don't do something to address this, the number just keeps increasing.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And why the first 7 years? I mean, Aristotle, one of the greatest philosophers of all time, give me a child until he is 7 and I will show you the man.
I love that.
Yeah. It truly is, this is the foundation. And when we're looking at the brain so much with Tana today, I wanted to bring this slide so everybody realize, by the age of 7, the child's brain is 95% the size of the adult brain. So all of that growth, all of that foundation, all of that platform is created in the first 7 years, which is why it's so important to hear what our very special guest has to say today.
Absolutely. So great to have you here. Let's deal with the elephant in the room, why don't we? You stand alone as a powerhouse in what you've developed as your message to the world, both in brain health as well as overall health. We'll talk about the Omni Diet. But wife to the wonderful Dr. Daniel Amen.
I am.
Of the Amen Clinics. And you are, as I understand it, vice president of the Amen Clinics.
I am.
Wow, that's a lot to take on. But wonderful work that you guys are doing separately and together. So kudos to all of that. And I say elephant in the room because Dr. Dan Amen is the man. And, but again, you stand out way, way outside of his shadow. One of the things I wanted to say that really caught my attention, we shared it together actually off camera, that you said that struck a nerve with us, and that is, as a registered nurse, you said, I think doctors tell you what to do, and nurses show you how to do it and hold your hand in the process.
Yeah, my husband and I came up with that because when I met him and started working together with him to come up with some of the nutrition programs for our patients and people he was working with, he sort of came up with that because he's like, I'm really good at telling them what to do, but I really need you to help them, like, really hold their hand and show them. And I'm like, well, that's kind of what nurses do. We advocate for patients, right? We help them with the program. We help them get it done.
I love it.
So,
and then this larger overarching helping turn, people's pain into purpose, but not just physical pain, mental, emotional pain. You share with us. I mean, we were also just starting to talk about it a few minutes off camera. What was your driving inspiration, your impetus to sort of branch off into this perhaps more holistic approach to health?
I was a trauma nurse. It was very Western medicine. I was like worked in a level A trauma unit.
Yep.
So this is very different. But if you like, just the title of my last book, which was a memoir, was The Relentless Courage of a Scared Child. Right. So you guys know a lot about ACE scores or adverse childhood experiences. Mine is an 8. So I have a score of 8 on a scale of 0 to 10. My nieces, who we adopted out of foster care, are a 9. And basically that's, just for the purposes of the listeners, that is a scale where they're rating the bad things that happen to you within your home, not even outside of your home, just within your home during your childhood years. And based on that rating, when I got interested in it was when I learned, this actually determines the outcome of your long-term health. I didn't know that. Who knew that? So basically, if you have a score, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of these stats, but if you have a score of 4 or more, then you are more likely to have 7 of the 10 chronic diseases that basically people suffer from in America. And if you have a score of 6 or more, you die on average 20 years earlier. So
it's the longevity factor.
Yeah, and that just explained my whole life because I was a really sick kid. I was a frequent flyer in the hospital. I was always on antibiotics, ding, 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 so my gut. But I had upper and lower GIs when I was 4 years old. And then I've had multiple surgeries. I had cancer when I was 23. And so it never made sense to me until I put it in that context. The chronic stress, the chronic fear, just the trauma, the past trauma that you deal with as a kid matters. It matters a lot. And I didn't want to repeat that cycle. Not only did I want to figure it out, because I was like, I'm not good with someone telling me I'm going to die 20 years early just because I had no control over my childhood. So I want to know what I can do to help mitigate that. And then I also want to know, how do I not repeat this pattern? I mean, we took in my nieces for a reason, and I have a daughter, and I want to make sure that I am doing something very different.
That's incredible.
Fantastic.
Self-empowerment. And so much of what we talk about on the show really does start not just in the physical brain, but in the mood, behavior, executive function parameters, right? For which I know you and your hubby are so well versed. And to our listeners, I think it's important for them to acknowledge that it does start foundationally with a lot of the nutrition and a lot of the ingredients we often talk about and focus on in the show. Yep. But so much of it does have to do with environment as well and the exposure to trauma and stressors. What are some of the resources, besides your incredible book, that folks, young parents with young children should be aware of? Resources to deal with trauma and deal with stress and deal with, some of these inadvertent experiences that, God forbid happens, but it happens all the time.
Absolutely.
Right?
So I think one of the number one things that really helped me, this is funny, my husband actually gave me 10 sessions of EMDR, or eye movement desensitization reprocessing is a form of therapy for trauma. And I almost canceled my first date with him when I found out he was a psychiatrist, because I was like, I don't want you to shrink me. Like, I'm not doing this. And then, of course, he gives me this gift as one of my first gifts from him. And I'm like, okay, you're shrinking me now. But it was the best thing I ever did, I have to tell you. So I think EMDR, for people who have been through trauma, it's a very specific type of therapy that really helps the brain reprocess. It doesn't get rid of it. It helps you reprocess it so it doesn't have the same trigger. You don't feel it the same way in your body. It doesn't sit the same way. And you feel more empowered. You feel more in control of it. And that was just critical for me. And then I think there are so many other resources that people don't realize. They're like, well, I don't have money to go to some of these doctors. There are so many, we live in an era of, just free resources. So even like our website or your podcast or our podcast, there's so many free resources out there that you can actually tap into. But I do think that if you've got past trauma, actually learning how to process that trauma is really critical.
It is. I mean, who doesn't also, right? And kids are resilient, but there comes a time when, certain traumatic events may be insurmountable or they need, clinical intervention. I'm sure Cleveland Clinic says EMDR is known to help because it manages, for its role anyway, in treating post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's used in expanding to include many different treatments and other conditions. So that's definitely something for people to look into.
Absolutely.
And as I alluded to earlier, who doesn't have trauma? But let's focus on the on I guess what we do best here on the show, which is dietary nutrition and ingredient backbone. You wrote a book called The Omni Diet.
I did.
Tell us all about that, because that applies to all ages and stages.
So I've written about 10 cookbooks, but the Omni Diet was, I would say, my hallmark or my trademark book, because that one really included the why behind everything you should do. And I really submerged myself. That was actually an organic outcome of my own journey and getting well. Yeah. And so then I just decided to put it all down for our patients, and it grew into this career. But really it's about what we are eating and how we're processing that food is either medicine or it is poison. And it's really pretty that simple. In this day and age, there's a lot of poison out there. And we don't even realize it because it's a slow poison. It's still a poison. And I think when I began to realize that, I really wanted people to understand that you don't have to settle for that. You know, you really can. There are so many foods out there that are healing, that are anti-inflammatory. But when you're eating foods that are inflammatory like that, especially as a child, it sets you up for a lifetime of chronic illness like I had.
That's the platform.
Right.
Childhood, yeah. So again, it just sort of brings us back to, in a way, it's common sense that we've forgotten. Clean water, clean food, clean air is what we require as human beings to grow and develop properly. And, you know, I think being put in the path of that so much is just that, you know, industry changed, food industry changed over these last 20, 30 years. And the numbers that we looked at the beginning are the reflection of those changes in people's diet and lifestyle. So to bring it back to the basics, clean food, clean water, clean air.
It's so true. Yeah. And I hear so many people get caught up in the food fight. You're not doing it right if you don't do this. You're doing it wrong. You have to. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's why so many people give up on it. And I think if you just go back to those basics of why don't we just focus on whole food, clean water, let's not get too crazy about all the little details. We just remove the sugar, minimize it as much as possible, get rid of the processed foods, the plastics, all of these things. We just start with that. We don't have to argue about all the details unless you've got specific issues with your kid, and then we go from there.